Hello, everybody. This is Tania Blanchard here. I'm the author of Echoes of War. Thank you so much for joining me this evening with Better Reading, Facebook Live. I'm really excited to talk to you about my new novel and also to answer any of your questions that you have. I'm sure we're in for a really fun half hour. So I'm just going to wait a minute or two for people to start to join our live event. So please let me know when you're here. Just pop a little hi in the comments. Let me know where you're from. Looking forward to talking to a lot of people this evening, and I'm looking forward to answering all your questions. Of course, anything I don't get to straight up, I'll try and answer later on this evening. So I guess while we're waiting for people to jump in, hello, Christine. You're my first viewer this evening, and you've just brought the book. Oh, fantastic. Well, I really hope you enjoy it. That's really great. While we're waiting for people, I think, look, I'll just tell you that I'm coming from my home here in Sydney. I'm actually sitting at my dining table. Hi, Sabine. Oh, you're from Inverloch in Victoria. Wow. I don't know what the weather's like down there, but it's actually really quite a warm day here in Sydney today. It's been up and down, hot and cold. I suppose that's spring for you. And I think we're in for another warm day tomorrow. Hello, Leanne. How are you? You're from Hamilton in Brisbane. Hi, very good. So I think, I'm in my dining room, which is where we've got the best internet at the moment. We've just come out of lockdown here in Sydney. Hi, Dan. How are you going? Hello, Sabine. How are you? 26 degrees. Very good. That's quite a nice spring day, isn't it? Very good. Yes, so I'm here at my dining table. We've just come out of lockdown here in Sydney, and this is actually my favourite place to write, here at this very spot on the dining table, but I don't get to do it very often. With everybody being at home, I've gone back to the peace and quiet of my office, which is a great space as well. But the reason I love sitting here at the dining table is because I can look out my front window and my back window. So the back window looks out into the backyard, and that's really peaceful. And the front yard looks out onto this beautiful Chinese elm tree and these beautiful camellia bushes that we have out the front. And at the moment, we've got lots of beautiful parrots coming in and eating the leaves and the buds and everything. So it's a really lovely spot. But enough about that. It looks like we've got lots of people starting to join now. Hello, Better Reading. Hello. Thank you so much for having me this evening. It's a wonderful opportunity to talk about Echoes of War. I really, really appreciate it. Hello, Yvonne. You're from Northern Rivers area of New South Wales. Hello, Yvonne. Alyssa. Hi, Alyssa. How are you going? And Wendy. Hello, Wendy. Kerry Ann. Hello, Kerry Ann. You're from Sydney. Yes, my hometown. You're looking forward to reading the new book, and you've loved the previous books. Thank you so much. Hello, Annabelle. Nice to see you. And Carolyn too. How are you? Hey, Kay. How are you? Nice to see you here this evening. And Emma and Marg. Hello, Marg. You're from Melbourne. Looking forward to my new book. I love The Girl from Munich. Thank you so much. I'm really glad you enjoyed The Girl from Munich. And Lottie. Yes, well, Lottie was based on my grandmother's life. So it's there we go. We're back. A few little problems. What do you expect? You know, this is technology. There's always something that's bound to go wrong, but it's the most wonderful thing because I can chat to everybody from all over Australia, from anywhere, in fact, and that's the most exciting thing about doing these beautiful live events over Facebook Live. Really wonderful. Look, I think, we've probably got a few people arriving now, so I think I might sort of start in a moment or so. Okay, I'll show you my book. You can see it, I've got them in the background there, and then my 3 previous books are down the bottom, you can see as well. Okay, so this side here. This is Echoes of War. This is my beautiful, beautiful new book. It's been released about a month ago. It's very exciting to finally have it out here in the world. It's a wonderful family story that's inspired by my dad's heritage. He comes from a small town in the very south of Italy, in a province called Calabria. His village is right on the very tip of the toe of Italy. So it's a really remote, but really, really beautiful place. You may or may not know that all my novels are inspired by family stories. And of course, Echoes of War is no exception to that. So I'd like to just start and just talk about this gorgeous cover with Echoes of War. Here we are, we're back again. Okay. The title Echoes of War is quite an interesting one, especially for a novel set in the south of Italy. There's lots of evocative titles that we could have used to match the beautiful imagery on the front cover. But Echoes of War is a great title, I think, because it speaks of the insidious threat and build-up of war and how all the wars that Italy was involved in the 1930s, leading up to and including World War II, touched the lives of those who lived in those remote regions of southern Calabria, right up until when war arrived on their doorstep. So what I love about this novel is that it's written from a really different perspective. It's the Italian perspective on war, especially during Mussolini's fascist regime, which I didn't know very much about before I started researching this book. And I love being able to explore Italy's unique position during World War II. So enough about the background. I'll tell you a little bit about the story. So my story starts in 1936 with fascist Italy already at war with Abyssinia, which is modern-day Ethiopia. So as Mussolini drives forward with his dream of colonial expansion and creation of a second Roman Empire, he wants to make Italy great again so it can stand tall amongst the powerful nations of Europe. So we first see Giulia, our main character. She's a spirited young woman in a monastery deep in the mountains of southern Calabria. She's grown up in a remote farming village right on the tip of the toe of Italy, where the traditional lifestyle continues on as it has done for centuries. Giulia loves her family, but struggles against her strict traditional upbringing, especially butting heads with her father, Andrea. So she wants to live a life, a big life, and become a healer like her nonna, her grandmother. And she doesn't really want to live the life expected of her within the village. But it is a tumultuous time in Italian history, and war touches even the remote villages as the young men of Calabria are called away to fight first in Abyssinia, and then the Spanish Civil War, and then Albania, and then, of course, when Italy joins World War II in 1940. So the women are left to run the farms and the businesses to make sure that life in the village continues as it always has done. And of course, war draws steadily closer until it finally arrives on Italian soil in 1943. And that's when the Allies invade Sicily, and Italy is then embroiled in this really bloody and brutal civil war between the fascist north and the Allied occupied south. So Giulia is really conflicted between her duty to her family and her desire to forge her own path until she decides that she can't remain a passive bystander any longer. She knows that she can make a really big difference to the lives of Italians affected by the war. They're her own compatriots. So at a time of great upheaval, with men trying to pull the world apart, this is one woman's story of determination to find a life's work, her place in the world she lives in, and the passion of a deep and abiding love. So that's the story of Echoes of War. I know you've got lots of questions here, so I'm happy to start answering. Hi, Lisa. You're here with your mum, Antoinette, in Melbourne. Hi, Melbourne. Great place. Good to see you're finally out of lockdown. Love your books and your female heroines. Thank you so very much, Lisa. That's lovely. Hi, Wendy. Okay, I haven't read any of your books yet, but it will happen. Thanks. I'm glad you will enjoy them. I hope when you finally get to them. That's wonderful. Hi, Dawn from Bendigo. Lovely to see you this evening. Kay, thank you. I do love the fact that you think the cover's beautiful. There we go. We can see The Girl from Munich on your screen as well. That was my very first book, which was inspired by the life of my German grandmother. So my mum's mum, when she was living in Germany during World War II. Okay. Wendy, it must have been very interesting learning so much more about your family members and what was happening around them at this time. It most certainly was, Wendy. The really fascinating thing that inspired this story, as a matter of fact, was this photo that I saw on my father's fridge a few years ago. It was a photo I'd never seen before, and it was a photo, a black and white photo of a man in uniform. He looked terribly like my dad, and I thought, this has got to be my grandfather. The problem was that I was told that he hadn't gone to World War II. He didn't have to join, and he was exempt from service. But I then discovered, speaking further to my dad, that my grandfather actually had joined the Italian army and went to war in Abyssinia in 1935, which is modern day Ethiopia. And I found that really fascinating. And he also then went to war in Albania in 1939. So it really got me intrigued in thinking about how my grandfather, who was this really quiet man, how leaving the remote village that he lived in and the farming community that he grew up in to visit exotic Africa might have changed his perspective on the world and on life. And really how then it might have affected his decisions for the rest of his life, and of course moving here to Australia in the 1950s. So that's what inspired the story of Echoes of War. I wanted to get a bit of a glimpse into the life of what those village communities, those agricultural communities in the very south experienced with the lead up to World War II and the war as well, because of course war didn't really touch them in a physical way by having battles in their village or anywhere nearby. But as you learn through the story, war does touch them in a very personal way. So yeah, that was the inspiration behind the original story. Hello, Tracy. How are you? And Jade, hello. Lynn, hello, how are you? How are we? We've got Sabine here. I read The Girl from Munich. Thank you, Sabine. I hope you enjoyed it. You're from Bavaria yourself. Well, I'm really glad that you enjoyed The Girl from Munich. That's really wonderful. Hello, Cass. I would love to know what the most surprising or interesting thing you learnt while researching this new novel was. I learnt lots of really interesting things, actually, Cassandra. I learnt that during World War II, women, well, as we know, women were a strong part of the community in Italy during World War II. But I was really fascinated to learn a little bit more about the folk healers. So I learnt a story from my father when I was asking him about the background of my grandparents' life and what he knew about their lives in Italy during the war. And he told me this fascinating story that his mother used to actually have people come and see her all the time with minor ailments, like babies with colic, adults with headaches. And she'd use all sorts of folk remedies and herbs and different techniques that she'd learnt in Italy to help heal people and help them feel better. And I was really fascinated to learn more about the role of folk medicine in southern Italy at this time. And it was really, really bound up with religion. So Catholicism is very strong in Italy, as you may well know, especially in southern Italy. And so the women and most of the community, as a matter of fact, would go and pray to the Madonna, which is Mary, and to the saints for healing and for help in their daily lives. And the folk healers would use this same kind of faith as well in their healing techniques. So I found that really fascinating. And the thing that intrigued me the most was that that connection harks back to the really ancient days of Calabria. Originally, it was an area that was settled by the ancient Greeks, sort of in around about the 8th century BC. And these traditions came out of the pagan rituals that the ancient Greeks brought to Calabria and have come right through to the present day. So I think that was one of the most fascinating things that I learnt about this time period, and also about this community, and what a strong community was based around the folk healer and the women who nurtured the village. Hi, Tania. What have you learnt about writing and publishing since your first book, The Girl from Munich, was published? Tell us the good, the bad, and the ugly. Hi, Tania. What have I learnt? I've learnt to trust my gut. I've learnt to listen to my publisher, because they have such a boundless, wonderful experience, and they're inevitably always put me on the right track. What else have I learnt? And I think since The Girl from Munich, I definitely have learnt to trust myself more and to become more confident in my writing. And I've learnt that structure is really important in the way that I write. So I definitely set myself a schedule each week. I have a number of words that I need to write each week to finish my first draft. And that's stayed really important to me. And then I finish that first draft before I go back and edit. So there's some of the things I've learnt along the way. Hi, Amy. Why do you think historical fiction with strong female narratives are so popular at the moment, especially those that focus on World War II? That's a great question, Amy. Thank you. Look, I think I started to touch on that a moment ago. It's all about discovering how strong women are during the war years. The men went off to war. The women had to step into the roles that the men used to do beforehand, and they took on everything. They took on jobs that the men used to do. And in this particular story, we see them out in the fields, dealing with the bureaucrats, the fascist bureaucrats, with the wheat quotas. We see women working on the black market to make sure that the village and the community has enough food, and that they have enough produce and enough of everything that they need, and the rations to last them through the war years. They've got a really strong sense of survival, and I find that really, really fascinating. And I think perhaps that a lot of readers do too. The strong sense of a woman, and I don't think in the past we've seen enough of these strong female characters, and how they can pretty well do anything that they put their mind to, equal to a man. And I think that's the beauty of these kind of stories, is that we're seeing the strong women, particularly in these difficult, extraordinarily difficult situations, and these traumatic circumstances, and they show such resilience and such strength. And it's not just individual strength, but strength in unity as well as women. And I think, people really resound to that kind of story. Okay. Hello, Carol. Is Echoes of War a standalone book? Hi, Carol. Yes, it is. So this particular story is inspired by my father's family history and the stories that he told me growing up, and that I've heard from my aunts and my uncles. So this is just a single story about the experience of those people during wartime. So my grandparents came to Australia in the 1950s, along with a lot of other migrants. So I was fascinated to learn about what their life might have been like before they came to Australia. And I learned some really fascinating things along the way. My father told me some amazing stories when I started to ask him about his mother telling him how afraid she was during the war when the Allies had invaded, and the Allied planes were flying overhead, and she was afraid of an air raid. They were in this tiny village in the middle of nowhere, nowhere near any military or strategic targets. But she was still petrified all the same, and they'd run out of the village into the fields. And I certainly placed that kind of story in Echoes of War as well, with Julia and her mother. And another story, I asked him actually whether his mother or his family had ever had any contact with the Nazis that far south in Calabria, and sort of nowhere near the coast of with Sicily on that western side. They were on the eastern side. And I was amazed to hear him tell me a story that his mother had said that the Nazis actually had come through their village just the once. And they were, their uniforms were in tatters, they were hungry, they were lost, they were desperate, they didn't know where they were. And so obviously they had got lost in the mountains. So this village is on the eastern coast. So they're on the eastern coast, and then the mountains are very close behind, and they actually had to get to the western coast where Reggio is, and where the Allied soldiers were coming across from Sicily, and they were lost. They'd got lost in the mountains and ended up on the east coast. So that was really fascinating to learn that they actually had some kind of contact with the Nazi soldiers. So that was really, really interesting to hear that they actually had some kind of contact then. Okay. Estelle, what is your next book going to be about? Very, very different this time, Estelle. I'm in the process of writing another family story. So all my novels come from family stories or family histories. And this time I'm looking at my husband's family. My husband's father's family comes from Durham in the north of England. And when I was looking into his family story, I came across this amazing woman who lived in the late 1800s. She was a school teacher, and she also was involved in running of a country pub in the north of England. And I was really inspired by her story and how she became a teacher, and how she ran the pub, and the circumstances involved in that. So it's a really fascinating story, lots of social change. Industrial revolution has already happened in England. So this village has gone from this lovely agricultural, pastoral community, and it becomes a mining town. And so that transformation is really interesting. And I've placed my character in this setting around the turn of the 20th century, late Victorian England. Really, really interesting story. So that's a total, complete change. Hi, Julie. Do you have any other interesting ancestors we will be reading about? Well, obviously, you've just heard about my husband's ancestor now in the next story. But yeah, most certainly, I have lots of family stories, Julie. I've got more stories I'd like to tell about my mum's side of the family. So that's my German side of the family, about my great-grandparents. And look, you'll see all sorts of interesting stories pop up in the future, and lots more stories on my husband's side as well. So a lot of his family come from England, but some of them were here in Australia in the 1830s as well. So stay tuned. There's all sorts of interesting things ahead. Hi, Tracy. How are you? I sometimes wonder if women would have made such strides in the world without war. Really interesting. I think women really step up to the mark when push comes to shove, and when we have nothing else that we can do. We have to actually step forward and step into the breach, and we're the glue that keeps families together. Where in the past, women were the ones that the strong ones behind their men. So I think that women do amazing things, and I love the stories of ordinary people in these extraordinary times, and the amazing things that they do, the strength and resilience and the courage that they have. So that's why I'm drawn to these kind of stories of ordinary people with these big historical backdrops. Lynn. Hi, Lynn. Really liked your book, Letters from Berlin. Thanks, Lynn. I'm glad you enjoyed that. So that story was based on my grandmother's cousin's story in Germany during World War II. So again, all of my books are related to family stories. Who are we going here? Jade. Hi, Jade. So my family is so boring compared to yours. Love the personal connection you have with your books. Jade, I reckon everybody has got an interesting family story. You've got to know where to look, where to probe, and what to ask. And sometimes it's just a tiny little snippet, that inspires a story to write, a really fascinating story. Or you just pull on the end of the thread and it unravels and you find this amazing story. Yes, everyone has some fascinating stories, don't worry. Hi, Melissa. How do you choose which family stories to develop into a book? That's a really good question. Thank you. Look, I think I just basically go with the stories that inspire me. I might hear a family story that just stays in the back of my mind, and I'm inspired by a particular character or maybe a setting or the historical background of a story. And then that just percolates in the back of my mind, and I find that it won't let go. And I know that that's the story I need to write next. I've got plenty of those kind of stories percolating, different family characters that I've learnt about over the time, or situations that they might be involved in, family stories that sound quirky or curious or interesting, and I want to learn more about. And then when I start researching, I find that they're really amazing stories. So that's how I choose which book to write next. Hi, Julie. Which authors do you like to read? Are you reading anything now? Julie, I love reading almost anything, but my favourite genres are maybe fantasy. I love reading historical fiction, of course, all the big sagas. I love a big saga like Ken Follett. I loved his Pillars of the Earth series, and I certainly would love to start reading his book that he released last year, The Evening and the Morning. I'm actually in between books at the moment. I'm pretty heavily into writing my first draft of my Durham book, and so I haven't had a lot of time to read at the moment. But a really gorgeous book I read not that long ago was called The Last of the Apple Blossom by a wonderful new author called Mary Lou Stevens. And it was set in the 1960s and 70s in Tasmania and talks about the apple industry. And it's a really heartwarming, beautiful story. And I love the opening scene with the bushfires in Hobart in 1967, I think. I was hooked by the very first page. So that was an absolutely gorgeous book. Watch out for that author because I think she's going to do great things ahead. Hi, Estelle. Would you write a story set in Australia? Well, Estelle, funny you say that. So after this Durham story, I'm actually going to write a book based here in Australia. So it will be about my husband's great-grandfather and great-grandmother. So my great-grandfather, or his great-grandfather, came to Australia in 1914. So this will be the son of the lady who runs the pub. So I'm going to follow his story and his wife's story here in Australia from 1914 through World War I and World War II. And they actually settled on rural New South Wales on a big property. So they were on the land. So I'll be really fascinated to follow the agricultural story of Australia, of New South Wales, through those really amazing years. Lots happened. Lots was developed over those years during the wars and then post-war as well, post-World War II. So I think that's going to be another really big story, big saga. Really lots of fascinating influences around that time. So I'm really looking forward to writing that one too. Hi, Mark. You just finished The Last of the Apple Blossom. Yes, my favourite book for this year. Loved it. I understand why, Mark. It's absolutely gorgeous. Yep. Jeannie. Hi, Jeannie. How are you? My mother was born in Germany, but I don't know anything about her father. If you're looking for your next book, okay, right. Sorry, it took me a minute to get what you were saying. Right. Yes, look, I reckon that it's wonderful to know about your family history. So many people actually touch base with me after reading my books to share their wonderful family stories with me. And it's an absolute honor as a writer to share other people's stories. And a lot of people say that they don't know a lot about their own family stories, and that my books are able to give them a little bit of insight into that period or that time. And that's a really wonderful thing for me to hear. It's a real privilege for me to be able to give that to other people. But a few people have asked whether I would write their family stories too. And I really, what I would say to everybody that's sort of interested in family stories is learn more about them if you can. Write those stories down, even if it's just for your own families and for your own future generations, so that those stories are never lost, because I think they're really important to keep all of our family stories. And I've got so many of my own to write that I don't have time to write anybody else's stories, not at this stage anyway. Now, look, we're coming close to the end of time. It's gone so quickly. I just want to thank everybody for joining me tonight. Thank you to the Better Reading community. You're absolutely wonderful. You've been such wonderful supporters of all my novels, and I really appreciate it. Thank you to Better Reading for this wonderful opportunity to talk about Echoes of War tonight. It's been really great to talk to everyone and connect with everybody, especially after these lockdowns. Hopefully we can talk to everybody in person again soon. Again, I just thank you everybody for a lovely evening, for a lovely chat. So this is Echoes of War, and I hope you enjoy the book when you get to read it. Let me know what you think. I'll be really fascinated to hear. Thank you very much again, everyone.